Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the program this evening. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator. Thank you for having me on your program once again.
Thank you for being here, sir. Um, Sir, I want to start with a topic that we discussed last week, and I think people were a little divided on that topic. And this is regarding F.W. de Klerk, his role in ending apartheid, and potentially how he should be remembered now that he's dead. And a key point as well is the video that was released after his death. And some have questioned why did they have to wait for him to die to release that video? So, sir, take us down memory lane on apartheid, the role F.W. de Klerk played in that, how he has been remembered uh, by some, because some really thank him for what he did. Others have just had quite a negative response to him. So, sir, where do you stand on this topic?
Thank you very much for that question. However, I need your permission. I crave your indulgence to start this program with a prologue, if you will permit me.
Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. Many times on this program, I have called the United States out. I've been very, very critical of the United States because at a very impressionable age, I bought into the American dream. America was the first country that outside Africa that I visited, studied there, grew up there, and I bought into the dream that the United States positions or embraces itself. And this was at a time when the United States had a president that was who was embraced by the whole world, including the Russians. And this was John F. Kennedy. He the children, and what they were worldly. The world loved them. Let me put it that way. So when America falls short of its own promises, uh, uh, that personal factor kicks in that this is a false dream that I embraced. Yesterday, a jury of 11 white men and one person of color found 3 white men guilty of murder, of murdering a black person in Georgia. And this is one of those episodes where America lived up to its dream. And it's one of those things that one should positively congratulate the United States because it was the right thing to do. And in congratulating them, encourage them that America is better when it lives up to its dreams and its aspirations than when it falls short of it. So I thought I should say that because, like most people in the world, I must confess, I was not expecting that verdict. I expected an acquittal of those three murderers as they are now, since they've been convicted. But the jury surprised us, and I congratulate the United States for that. Now, the question you've raised, it will be a disservice to the memory of the Steve Bikos, the Chris Hannings, the hundreds of anti-apartheid activists who were murdered, at times under atrocious conditions, when de Klerk was Prime Minister. All you need to do is to read the report of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Do you remember vividly? It's stuck in my brain. Do you remember that episode where Archbishop Desmond Tutu broke down during one of the sessions because of the details that were being presented to them? De Klerk was Prime Minister. Before then, he was a high-ranking minister, and it's like Hitler, because Hitler saw the light at the last minute. You then want to forget that he was responsible for killing 6 million Jews under atrocious conditions, just because he saw the light at the end of the day. So I don't buy into this. Let us forget the past and move on. Especially, I must say this, especially when the whole ground norm of the International Criminal Court is not to forget the past. Bring them before the court. Bring the heads of states, especially from middle income countries, before the court for what they have done. Why didn't they take de Klerk before the court? Why was a special court not set up for South Africa the way special court was set up for Rwanda, Bosnia, Yugoslavia, etc., etc.? Why? Simply because we Africans are always being asked to forget the past, whether it is the colonial past, whether it is the apartheid past, whatever it is, and move on. But if it is us, Black people, who commit atrocities, then we are not allowed to forget that past. We must be punished. We must be put on trial. Secondly, was he really repentant? I'm not talking about the video on the eve of his death. I'm talking about the agreement he had with Mandela. I have said it here, and I will repeat it. That agreement was to ensure that the white community in South Africa kept its control of the economy while political power was passed on to the ANC. And they also ensured that they compromised the ANC leaders. The present president, Ramaphosa, was put on board of several companies. He became a millionaire. The same thing with Becky. The same thing, surprisingly, not that he was put on board, but the mansion that Mandela was given was from the Oppenheimer family. And by the way, this really was what upset the previous president, that, while they were sent to go and, what's his name? Zuma? Yes, the Zuma, that while they were sent to go and pacify the rural areas, the people in Johannesburg at the center were being positioned by being compromised by economic positions to take over the leadership of the country. So they were really absorbed into the system. That was a very devious agreement, and it was designed to fail, and it has failed. And this is why you keep having riots upon riots upon riots, as the blacks are saying, what did we gain with the end of apartheid? What did we gain for all that struggle? And I hold the clerk responsible, because he was the arrowhead of the agreements. He was given his Nobel Peace Prize. I don't begrudge him. Some Nobel Peace Prizes are beyond understandings, like the peace of God that passes all understanding. So they sit there in Sweden or wherever, and they give out these Nobel Prizes. At times is to recognize, at times is to encourage, and at times is simply a recognition by the Nobel Committee that the unthinkable has happened. Like when they gave Obama, within the first 6 months of him in office, they gave him the Nobel Peace Prize. It really was more what they gave that Nobel Prize for was what a black person becoming, in our time, president of the United States, the most powerful man in the world, where we recognize that, take the Nobel Prize. So that's what probably they did with de Klerk. I wish him rest wherever he is, but I think that we will be doing a disservice to the memory and the sufferings of the Chris Hannis, the Steve Bikos, and hundreds of young men and women who died brutally under his regime.
Sir, there are two questions I want to pull out from what you said there. The first one is this: what alternative did he have at the time he did what he did? And the second question is this: at what point does Africa break away from what we suffered in the past and forget. Because you seem to be suggesting, sir, that we shouldn't forget. I hope I haven't misunderstood that. But you seem to be suggesting we shouldn't forget. But when do we forget and move on?
You'll be making a mistake to forget and then move on, because then you'll be building that future on a vacuum. Do you think the Israelis, the Jews, will ever forget what happened to them in Germany? And that, in fact, and that's why the phrase always pops up, never again. And that seems to be the guiding principle of every Jew, never again. And that means they will build constructs that would guide against a repetition of the Holocaust. So, in our case, why should we forget? I am not saying we should go on an expedition of vengeance. No. But when Nkrumah came up with the concept of neocolonialism, you know, the same white scholars treated it with contempt. You know, he's so, you know, embedded in colonialism, he even needs to invent a phrase for it. But Nkrumah was talking about the use of world economy and the use of the deep state to destabilize newly independent countries. They got rid of him, they overthrew him through military officers who were trained in England. That after they had destroyed his economy by lowering the price of cocoa on the world market. That was what his economy was based upon. And if you want us to talk about the French, the pit that the French dug for their colonies on the eve of independence, and that is still there. So what do you want to forget? They were made to sign a colonial pact that orders them to keep their financial whatever in France, not in their central bank. Their currency and its relationship to the French franc is fixed by France. And they only have access to 25% of the financial reserves, which they are forced to keep in France. Now, let me say this. The French don't have a gold mine. They don't. But they control the gold mines in Mali. And so the French vault in their central bank is filled with gold reserves. Mali has no gold reserve, and yet it has a gold mine under the control of the French. So What do you want us to forget? But as I said, I'm not saying we should go on an expedition of vengeance. Vengeance belongs to the Lord. But don't forget your past.
Yes, sir. There's a question here on Facebook, on YouTube. This one is YouTube here, sir. And this person is saying, what else could de Klerk have done for the blacks in South Africa, regardless of his motives for ending apartheid? What else could he have done? What other option did he have? And that's a question on YouTube here. And the follow on question also says, should there be some form of repatriations for what has happened?
Well, what he could and he should have done was to persuade the the white giants of the economy to surrender part of the wealth to a growing black middle class. Number two, land, which is very emotional for Southern Africans because they are a cattle culture. Their lands were stolen from them. They were not bought. He could have persuaded farmers to surrender part, I didn't say the whole, but part of their land back to the communities where they were taken from, in order to build a black middle class in South Africa. If he had done that, you will still be growing the economy, maybe not at the rate at which the unjust possession by the white community had engendered, but you'll be growing a stable economic community, both for blacks and for whites. That's what he should have done, and not just hand over an empty shell of political power to the ANC. There was another question, a follow-up question. I don't remember what that is.
It's about looking at any sort of form of compensation and
Reparation.
yes, sir. But before you answer that, sir, there's another question here that I think I want to add to that because they sort of go together. It says, do you think that there isn't unity of purpose among the blacks to seek for reparations? In the time of Mandela, it would have been realizable. So the first one is, should it be there? The second follow-on question is, well, actually, even if you bring it in now, do we have the unity of purpose to be able to distribute whatever comes up amongst the people? And who exactly do you give that to?
Well, I mean, I'm not a South African, and I'm not an economist. The question that deals with details of reparation is what a government commission should address. Let us agree on the principle. Just as the Germans have now agreed on reparation for what they did to the Hereros in Namibia, even though the Hereros are arguing that they were not part of the negotiation. And I hope that the Namibian government will handle that issue delicately. But the whole question of reparation is one that the world will still have to face when it comes to Africa. Again, I'm not calling out the Jews as a hate process. No, I'm just using it as an illustration. Since the end of the Second World War, Germany has been paying reparations to Israel, and they're still paying it till today. Why should Africa, that suffered slavery, that suffered colonialism was economic exploitation of African resources. The colonial countries, authorities, did not bring resources from their own exchequer to Africa. They took out. So let us agree, let the African Union actually set up a commission on reparation so you could get the parameters right. Let them adopt the parameters, take that to the United Nations. It may take you 25 years, it may take you 50 years for the UN to finally adopt the reparations for Africa, and then you can then go into the details of who gets what. It may not be a perfect system. There's no system that is perfect in any case. You could just be tinkering with it as you go along.
Thank you for that analysis. I want to move on to the United Kingdom and France, and to the very awful tragedy that has happened in the Channel. Now, both countries are blaming each other for not handling that issue appropriately, and France is accusing the UK of wanting to politicize what has gone on there. It's been recorded as the largest number of deaths in the Channel. What is your view on what is going on there, sir? And how should France and the UK deal with that issue?
You keep asking me these questions that call for advisory opinion, but nobody pays me to give advice. The president of France is being paid his salary precisely to deal with that question, while the prime minister in Britain is, living in number 10 Downing Street, with the responsibility of dealing with that.
Sir, I was going to say your responses
Yes.
are almost becoming somewhat prophetic. So, so maybe
well,
we should be making more noise about that.
okay. What is happening between France and England or Britain reminds me of the warning given by Muammar Gaddafi. He said, look, Europe, don't come and overthrow me. Don't come and destroy me, because I am the one standing between a flood of refugees into Europe. I'm the one keeping them in my own country. If you get rid of me, you remove, that filter, that barrier. And he was right. after he got killed, well, you know. Now, if the French, you see, the refugees in Calais don't want to stay in France, actually. They want to go to Britain. And if the French remove their forces from there, will Britain be able to cope? Britain should realize that France is doing Britain a service by trying to monitor and control the refugees in France. This whole issue is very confusing. And I'm not really sure that I myself have thought out carefully what the solution is. If France decides to send back, evacuate all those refugees there back to their countries, they will say that's a violation of international law for refugees. That's what they will say. They will accuse the liberal media, liberal commentators will now turn it around and accuse France of violating the rights of refugees to be there. And yet the refugees don't even want to be there. They want to go to Britain. That as short as, that's part of why Brexit succeeded. Those arguing for Brexit were promising to protect Britain from an influx of refugees. And from the data that we have seen, more illegal refugees have arrived in Britain this year, running those risks than last year. And in spite of the unfortunate tragedy that happened in the past couple of days, today, three boatload of refugees had arrived in Britain. So they are not deterred. But let us get things clear. Britain doesn't want them. And I think France is performing a Herculean task, allowing them into France and keeping them on its territory. Because while you cannot force them onto boats to go to Britain, like the Belarusian man was trying to force people into Poland, France could actually put them on planes and fly them back to their country. But the beneficiaries of all this tragedy are the human smugglers. Don't France and Britain, with all their security apparatus personnel, know who these human smugglers are? I don't believe that they don't know who they are. I just don't believe it. So again, we come back then to politics being played at the cost of human life.
So let's go to Libya, back in Africa, and this week the Electoral Commission there has stopped some candidates from being eligible to vote, to be voted for in the elections. But there is one particular one that caught my attention, and that is the son of former President Gaddafi, who has also now been banned from competing in the elections. What are your views on that? And I will show you something while you're responding to that question, sir, which I suspect will trigger some memories. I have something to show you on that one.
I see. All right. I'll watch out. Let us hope it doesn't derail my thoughts, when I say
Hopefully not.
um elections in Libya, most in December, most unlikely to take place. Um the country is still so fractured, and the candidates that I see popping up are going to evoke memories that that the election will even lead to a more fractured result. Look at what has just happened in Iraq, where a particular fact. Oh, yes, yes, I remember this. I remember this.
I will come
Gaddafi
back to
was
ask you questions about this, sir.
all right. Okay. Um, remember Iraq, where a faction has just decided they will not accept the outcome of the results. The same thing will happen in Libya. And this is often where I talk about whether democracy serves fractured societies. You know, couldn't we have had that African tradition of Ndaba, where the elders sit and come up with a consensus? Let us have a consensus that leads to the evolution of a prime minister, ministers, appointed, and there are no clean hands in Libya. So, the Western media often then gets it all wrong. Oh, this one has something in its past. This one, ICC has been looking for him. That one, the World Court has been looking for him. Come on, in what country do you really have people with clean hands? In what country? So leave things well alone. Have a consensual, an alliance of all these factional leaders, and let them rule the country and gradually evolve a system where they then have stability. Stability and development are what Libya needs now, not democracy. I'm sorry to say this, not democracy. Democracy is not going to be workable in any case. It won't. Just as it's not workable in Iraq, it was not workable in Afghanistan, where it was 419 elections that they kept patching together until they couldn't even agree on how to fight the Taliban. This is what's going to happen in Libya.
Sir, before I go to that photograph, someone has raised a very important point here that somewhat addresses the point you've just made on Libya and also takes us back to the issue between the UK and France. And the question is this: are human smugglers really the problem? Migrants are fleeing something and are ready to risk their lives. What do you think they are fleeing from? in essence, are we addressing the right problem here?
Yeah, we are addressing the right problem. They are they are fleeing countries that are that have been destabilized, a lot of bloodshed, economy ruined, and what have you. Perhaps this has just occurred to me. Perhaps we should say it is the countries that invaded those countries who should take the refugees because they caused it, and not subject innocent European countries who were not involved in the war in Iraq, the war in Syria, the war in Afghanistan, and not subject them to the responsibility of coping with the refugees. Let those who invaded them and haven't created the chaos took off and went back to their countries. And unfortunately for the refugees, unfortunately for these countries that I have in mind, they are protected by vast oceans that refugees cannot cross. And so you end up, with Italy and Greece and even Poland being victims of these illegal immigrants, which they didn't cause. So that is my first reaction. The second one is this. Frankly, until you stand and fight for your country, you simply surrender that country to people you don't then want to live under. All these other countries that you are going into are just going to be refugees there. You will never be complete and whole when you get to wherever it is you want to go. Whereas in your own country, if you fight, if you stand and fight, yes, there will be more bloodshed, there will be more chaos, but at the end, if you stand and fight, then those who are trying to impose themselves on you will then have to sit with you and reach some form of a compromise.
So someone has put a question here on YouTube. I think you may have addressed it somewhat, but I will want to read it anyway. And this person is saying that why don't the leaders of the country where the immigrants are coming from take responsibility for their own citizens? And I think that's what we were seeing between the with the issue in Belarus that was going on there. Why didn't some of the people that have died here are Iraqis, Iranians? Why don't those two countries take responsibility for their own citizens, come in and grab them and take them back?
But because the government in some of these countries are not even in a position to stop the illegal immigrants. They don't have the state apparatus on the ground to monitor their activities. The people who do, who have the state apparatus, security apparatus, are Britain and France that we have mentioned, earlier. Even Italy doesn't have sufficient state apparatus to prevent the immigrants coming into its territory. But back, the Iraqi government has had to flights already, I understand, to take its own citizens from Belarusia back to Iraq. But I've also listened to even some of those who have been returned, who said he's giving the government 6 months. If there's nothing happening in 6 months' time, he will again, if he finds the opportunity to go again in spite of what they have suffered. So we are now really talking about governments that will operate on the basis of one, inclusivity. Example, Kurds must be included in the government of Iraq. There are also other groups, other nationalities in Iraq who feel they have no portion in what is going on in Iraq. The same thing in Syria. I like what I am seeing in Syria, in the Arab countries, taking the initiative to bring Assad back from the cold, so to speak. Maybe they would then be able to persuade him, rather than force him, but to persuade him that it will be in his own interest if all these groups that have been fighting him, he could find a way of bringing them into government. It is if you have government that believe in justice, equity, inclusivity, not necessarily literacy, that to me could checkmate the outflow of this refugees. But the fact that people today still went on that Calais to Dover road really shocked me to the bones. Really shocked me to the bones.
So let's return to this. Let's return to this photograph. One, give us the context of what happened when this photograph was taken. And then we'll want to hear some of the views of Gaddafi himself. Probably, maybe he expressed some views about his children and maybe the political role they could play in the future of Libya. But give us the context about this photograph, sir.
My president then, General Ibrahim Babangida, has sent me to Libya for something which I cannot remember now, because I visited Libya several times. And what struck me was Gaddafi's fondness for me. I mean, I was a foreign minister. He was a head of state or the leader. So, he didn't have to show any personal feelings towards me, but he did. And this was one of those occasions when I had come, and the tradition was, it's not like in other places where they will give you a fixed appointment even before you land. You will land, you'll be well received, put you in first class, 5-star hotels, and you will then just wait. You could wait for a week. You could wait for 2 weeks. I remember one occasion when I got so angry. I sent word to the Air Force pilots that I want to take off. I want to go back. Now, we knew that the control tower will not give us clearance. But what will you do to a Nigerian foreign minister? Shoot down the plane? I was prepared to risk it. And those Air Force pilot boys, they were marvelous. They said, sir, we'll take off. Let them, come chasing after us. But somehow, he must have got to know. And I knew he would know because I was talking openly in my hotel suite with my staff. And of course, I expect that hotel suite to be booked. So they must have told him, because within 2 hours, we got an appointment to come and see him. And I think this then was on that occasion. They don't take you to any presidential palace. We drove round Tripoli, all over the place, that you kept wondering, are we going to another town or another country or what? Then we turned into a stadium. They were not playing football or anything. We turned into the stadium. Again, drove around the stadium, and then all of a sudden, we took a right turn out of the stadium into a grove of olive plants. And the car came to a stop. And there was Gaddafi sitting on just a simple chair, and the children, the son and the daughter, sat next to him. So I was with the Nigerian ambassador. So I paid my compliments. And he then said to the children, come on, go and take it. He spoke now in English. Go and take a picture with him. He's a very important man. You never can tell. Maybe he will be a great man in his country. Take a picture. And you will notice Saif Islam, the son, was straight like that. He didn't know what to do. He was embarrassed. The girl was more relaxed. But it was Saif, Islam, the son, who was just fixed. But when the father said, he's an important man, take the picture. And after they took the picture, he had the protocol, take the children away, while we then sat down and we talked. He had a fondness for Nigeria as well. The way he spoke. Wait, he was worried about that.
We lost you for a minute there, Prof.
With Libya, we'll get on. We'll get on.
Prof, we lost you for a minute there.
Oh,
Yeah,
where?
just the last point. But let me move on to one question. We have a very short time left. So I'm going to move on to one key question, sir, in the short time we have left. And this is regarding Ethiopia and the news that the Prime Minister decided to take the war to a new level by going to the war front. Now, many months ago, still this year, we had another African leader that did that and was killed at the war front. Sir, is this a Churchill moment, or is this recklessness on the part of the Prime Minister?
Before I answer your question. Let me deal with one point on Ethiopia, which will shed some light on what is going on. Today, one of the global television stations has been carrying an exclusive news. Or we have a satellite that has showed UAE supplying weapons to the Ethiopian government, and they've been showing the pictures and so. And I said to myself, is the Ethiopian government not entitled to get weapons from whoever is ready to give the country the weapons? Are there Arab countries that are not buying weapons from abroad? Or you are now, and yet you are not talking, you are not asking about who's supplying weapons to the Tigray liberation movement. This unequal prejudice coverage of the conflict is what I've been hammering on each time you bring up this matter. That the president or prime minister has decided to do this. I suspect that the way the army is the way the federal army is being pushed back by the Tigray and Omoro liberation movement probably showed a lack of confidence on the part of the troops, and is hoping that his presence in the front, in spite of what you've said, that it may cost him his life, but his presence on the front may stiffen the resistance of the federal troops to start being able to push back the Tigray liberation movement. Is it wise what he's doing? I would doubt it. Is it advisable? Not. It's a sign of desperation. It is a sign of desperation. But I suppose it will be well guarded.
Sir, we have run out of time today. Thank you so much for your comments. And I want to read something to you that someone has said. Prof is an international scholar from whose fountain of knowledge France and UK can learn. This is the honor of acknowledged scholars. So Prof does not need a salary.
Okay. Okay.
So thank you so much, sir, for your time this evening. And on that note, we will end the program tonight. Thank you to our viewers for being there. If you haven't subscribed, don't forget, just hit that subscribe button so you get the alerts whenever we go live. Thank you, sir, for this evening. We'll be here again next week.
Wakanda.
Bye, sir.
Peace.